Something recruits you to play it. The way someone acts or the way someone talks to you or some circumstances that arise. And then off you go playing some game that really doesn't serve you well. Who's got, we'll just mention a few of these to brainstorm. You got one?
Yeah.
What is yours?
I call it the no self-esteem game.
No self-esteem game. So what would trigger that off? Just about anything. Okay. Okay. So the no self-esteem game.
I'll just have a cup of tea, then I'll feel better. Chocolate, then I'll feel better. Then I'll feel better.
Okay. So I would call that the psycho-eating game. This food will make me feel better. So we eat not for nourishment and vitality. We eat for psychological reasons, comfort and feeling good and self-esteem.
And putting off the things you've got to do.
Okay. So the procrastination game. Okay. So those.
What kind of corollary of hers is it doesn't count when I'm going to eat this, but it doesn't count.
Oh, it doesn't. This doesn't count. This has no calories. This brown chocolate brownie. Okay.
Or just one more piece of chocolate. It's okay. It doesn't count.
Doesn't count. One more piece of chocolate doesn't count. Okay.
You know what?
Okay.
No matter what, I didn't do it game.
Say a little bit more about that.
Just being blamed for things that I feel that I wasn't, responsible for.
Okay. Okay. Good.
That's a really good one. It's
Oh shit, I'm late again. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I like to suffer in silence if somebody doesn't do their part. I'll do it, but I'll suffer in silence.
Okay. I suffer in silence because of you, game.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good one.
Well, until I got optic neuritis in my right eye and I lost 80% of the vision at that time 6 years ago, I was playing I'm the Superman game. I can always give.
Okay.
And I don't have to expect anything back. I'm Superman.
Okay. Okay. A game that a lot of people helpers fall into, that I can give and give and give and okay.
It switched me out of that mode quickly after that.
Okay.
Not enough time game. Always on the rush. Always go, go, go.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be enough time game.
Okay.
There's like procrastination of details or administrative tasks, things I don't like to do. There's the perpetual always in the other pile and focusing on fun things I really like to do. And then the other pile just adds up and adds up.
Okay. Nobody else would have that one, but that is I procrastinate on those undesirable tasks. And why can't everything be fun?
Being unavailable emotionally.
Okay. The emotional unavailability game. Okay. I could imagine that would work really well in relationships. Can we go out and date and then be emotionally unavailable?
After the dinner.
Yeah.
After the dinner.
Is that the great struggle I want to be alone?
Okay.
I want to be alone.
Okay.
I've heard other games like I'm the victim and you're at fault game, and then you carry that further. You must compensate me because I'm the victim game.
Yeah. You owe me.
You owe me.
You owe me game. Yeah. Okay.
The game of feeling of never doing enough, no matter how much you do, it's just never
Okay.
enough.
Okay. So that's the perfectionism game, because psychologically, perfectionism means it could have been better, not good enough yet, and so not good enough yet game. Okay. Let me work. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, when treated unfavorably, I return the favor by pointing out the person's faults.
Okay. So when I'm treated unfavorably,
How generous of you.
point out your faults. Okay. Let me work with someone up here, and we'll just explore. And what we're doing is, once again, detecting the matrix. Now we're using games and frames as part of our language of how to get in and to explore that. You want to? Okay. Come on down. So what would be the negative behavioral pattern that you've had enough of?
I'm a coach, and in the beginning I had lots of free time, so I gave extra coaching to clients free.
Okay.
I'm still doing that now, and I really don't have the time to do that.
Okay. So what is the game you're playing then?
The game that I'm playing is if I now tell them that I can't give the extra time, then they're going to perceive that I'm greedy, or it's going to somehow change their opinion of me.
Okay. So the game you're playing in your mind?
Is I can't change it now because I've already set it up that way.
Okay.
Or if they're hurting, I really need to give them time.
Okay. So that kind of sounds like what we said earlier, maybe the you owe me game, but now you owe them.
Right.
It may sound like the game of if I start out some way, I can never undo or change or...
Yes, and if they call and it's just something, oh, I need coaching on this, no problem. But if it's something that's urgent to them, that's going to make a lot of difference right now, then I feel obligated.
Okay. So if we were to name this thing, and that step one here is describe the game-like pattern by identifying some of the behaviors and then what colloquial name would you give to it, it sounds like you play the I owe you, I owe the world game.
Yes.
Would that be a fair thing about one of the frames of mind that you have, that as you move through the world, you feel like you owe a lot of people things?
Right.
Their urgency is your obligation?
Yes.
Their urgency is your obligation.
That's the game I play.
Oh, I could play you. My urgency is your obligation. I like that.
And intellectually, I know it can't be that way because I see I can't get to where I want to go while playing that game.
Okay. Yeah.
But emotionally, I get caught up in a moment.
So step number 2 is gauge the intensity. How intense is this game? Their necessity is your obligation.
At the time when their necessity comes up, it's very intense.
Okay.
I'll move around all types of things in my schedule to make it happen.
So at that point, if 0 is none at all and 10 is just absolute,
8.
So you're up in an 8. So it's a very intense. It gets you.
Yes.
Okay. Number 3 is identify its negativity. How is it negative to you?
It doesn't allow me to spend time marketing my business, doesn't allow me to spend time learning as much as I want to. It affects my income negatively. It affects me not having enough time for hobbies.
Okay.
All those things.
Okay. So a lot of...
And I can't come to as many of your seminars as I want to.
Well, we do need to change this.
Yes. Give him some motivation.
So a good many negative effects and consequences from playing this game.
Yes.
Have you had enough of this game?
Yes.
So you're ready to quit this one?
I'm ready.
Okay. Number 4 there is identify some of the positive payoffs. What is positive about this pattern?
The positive is they come in with the problem. I can get on the phone with them 45 minutes to an hour. They feel great.
Okay.
And I feel great at having helped them.
Okay.
That's
so
the secondary gain.
So that's something you get from it. You're
Yes.
a great helper.
Yes.
And you've extended yourself.
Yeah.
What do you get from that? When you get that sense that I've helped, I've really made a difference.
Makes me know that all the time that I've spent learning NLP has paid off.
Okay.
I feel good about myself.
Okay. So a lot of positive benefits from playing that.
Yes.
What feeds and maintains this pattern?
I do, when I do that, even though I do it at the expense of other things, I learn other things. Every time I do coaching with someone, I learn something.
Okay.
So,
and that's important.
And I love to learn.
Okay.
So that feeds it. The good
Okay.
feelings that I get feeds
I
it.
don't feed it. So those are wins that you're getting from this game, even though the game is not really serving you well. And so if you were to weigh the negatives and positives,
the way I sum it up as, even though it makes me feel good here and helps the person, ultimately I'll be able to help out less because I won't be able to learn as much as I want to in the end. I won't be able to take the seminars I want to, won't be able to have the lifestyle that I want to. So ultimately, it's a destructive game.
Okay, okay. If you didn't play that game, what game would you like to play around the same thing of someone having an urgent need?
I'd like to play the game of being available most of the time because it's fun to me. I don't mind the time that I spend, but just emailing clients, setting up a fee basis, and if I spend any extra time with them, charging for it.
Okay. So if the previous game is your urgency is my obligation, the new game would be?
The new game would be, if I have time, I can work that in, and that'll be at the regular fee.
Okay. So it sounds like you want to play a negotiation game.
Yes.
Maybe I can help you, maybe I can't. If I can, I'll check my schedule, my time, my energy, and I'll negotiate with you. So if you played that game, then their urgency would not be your obligation.
No, it would not at all. It would be a possibility of me being able to help if it worked in.
Okay.
But not an obligation.
Okay. What frame of mind, you've mentioned a couple already, but what other frames of mind has supported this old frame? That their obligation, their necessity was somehow your obligation.
I enjoy helping. Okay. In marriage, I really needed some help, and as I went from the people that I wanted to go to, I couldn't. They kept putting me off, and that left a nice anchor in my mind of people not caring for people because they were not willing to help.
Okay, so the decision you drew from that, the conclusion you drew from that?
If you really cared about people, you would be willing to help.
Okay.
You'd fit it into your schedule.
So what frame would you have to have so that you can maintain the positive values, caring for people, giving, making a difference? What frame of mind would you have to play the new game and still be a caring person, a contributing person, a person who makes the difference?
I'd have to have a frame of I only have X amount of slots open during the week because I have to take care of me too.
Okay.
There's other things I have to do, and if I can work it in, I certainly will.
Okay.
I have to check my schedule.
So the highest frame there is you've got to take care of you.
Yes.
You believe that?
Yes.
Has that been, what part has that played in the old game?
That's been being put aside. I've been taking care of other people instead.
Okay. Do you have permission to take care of you? If you go inside and say, I give myself permission to take care of me.
No, that's what I want permission to do.
Okay. So try that on. Go inside. I give myself permission to take care of myself first, so that I can.
Actually, that feels good.
Okay. Any objections, any complaints, any worries, any fears, anything shouting in the back?
No.
I give myself permission to take care of me. I give myself permission to not be under obligation from other people's urgencies. How does that fit?
That feels good.
I give myself permission to choose the urgencies I'll respond to.
I like that one better.
Okay, so that even...
I like that one a lot better.
Okay. Okay. And any other thing that comes to mind as you think about the permission to respond out of your strength and out of your resourcefulness rather than just obligation?
No, the only thing that comes to mind is that's the last step in the plan to get to where I want to go.
Okay.
Got the other things ready.
Okay. So try that on. Let's just see what happens if you try that on. I give myself permission to take care of myself, to make sure I have time for my hobbies and time for my health, time for my own resourcefulness, my relationships. I give myself that permission, and other people's obligation is my choice. Other people's necessity is my choice for responding.
I like that. I like that. It feels much more congruent because before it was this and both pulling in different ways.
Okay.
And that feels congruent.
Okay. As you think about trying that on and looking at a client with those eyes. Just imagine meeting someone or on the phone with someone, and you do so with those eyes and that awareness. Your necessity is not my obligation. Your necessity is your necessity. I'm not under obligation. I'm under choice, and I can choose, but I don't have to. How does that feel as you think about going out into your future with that frame of mind? Is that ecological? Are you aligned with that?
That feels good. It actually does.
Okay.
Because if I don't do that, then I become a slave to the obligations, and then ultimately I don't help them or me.
Okay. So let's put this to the test.
Okay.
Let's put this on and really.
Okay.
What state would you be in if you really was taking care of you first?
Okay.
And choosing, and being. I guess there's a firmness in there. You know, I don't have time. I'll see you next week.
Yeah. The state would be being very aware of the schedule, having it there in front of me, and just knowing if I do this, I'm going to take away from this, and
okay.
So you have that knowing. As priorities.
So you have that knowingness. What emotion would you be experiencing?
Emotion would be it would be an empathetic state.
Okay.
But
so you're still caring.
Yeah, it's still caring, but it's also valuing myself and the priorities that I have set at the same time.
Okay. So try all that on.
Okay.
And do you know how to turn that up and make that even stronger?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Got it.
Now let's imagine someone out there. I really need you, Rick. Rick, my life will fall apart if you don't respond to this.
I can't help you right now, though I can this next Monday. I can set an appointment. That's the earliest I would be able to do.
How's that feel?
That feels good.
Okay. Okay.
That feels good.
So you like that?
I like that a lot.
Okay. Will you keep it?
Absolutely.
Okay. What belief would support this?
If I don't do that, my business won't grow beyond where it's at right now.
Okay. And what would that mean to you if your business doesn't grow beyond where it's at now?
It means I'm stagnant, and the learning that I'm doing is never going to pay off.
Okay. And if that came to be, what would that mean to you?
A waste.
Okay.
A total waste.
So is that enough energy to move
Yes.
away from that?
Yes.
Okay. And if you move away from that, what are you moving toward?
If I move away from that, I'm moving toward a lot more financial freedom.
Okay.
A lot more confidence in myself. A lot more achieving the priorities that I have in my life.
Okay.
Because right now I'm letting that time go that I would spend on my priorities, and sometimes giving a lot of that away to clients.
Okay. So it sounds like the new game is maybe being really a healthy helper, a helper with some good boundaries. How would you name the new game? Because finding the right words for the
I'm in control of my schedule. I do help people, but I do it as my schedule permits.
Okay. So how does that feel?
That feels good.
Okay. And you know how to play this new game? You got the rules in your mind, how to play it? Okay. You know who to play it with and when and where?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Give them a hand. Thank you, Rick. And so right now, while we're not looking to do transformation as such, we'll get to that, we move in that direction, but what we're mostly doing is looking to see and to detect a matrix. And in this instance, we're going to use frames and games and just play around with it that way. It seems to me to be an easy way in to identify the pattern and what frames need to change so that we can have a new pattern. So you can see I walk through the first few steps just identifying that old game, and oftentimes a game will just fall apart when you just detail it out. And especially the weighing of the negatives and the positives. On those points, don't go too fast. Let the person really detail out the negatives and the positives, And then asking them that kind of comparison question, how does that weigh out? And the question also we're asking is, have you had enough of this old game? Even though it leads to here, we need to keep the positives to build the positives back into the new game. Because if we're losing, then we're not going to go in that direction. So that's why we want to find out what's been keeping it there, what's been supporting it, what maintains it, and then the question will be, how can you get rid of the old game and keep these positive facets as resources, and what shifts and changes do you need so that you can build up a new way to play this process?
Balance. We were talking about your beliefs, that you didn't go into beliefs here. I just wondered, that's part of the wheels that were turning for me.
Okay.
Beliefs, self-esteem, what can you be a good coach, caring coach, and also take care of yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Even the modeling that you do for people that you're coaching. So if that comes off, it would be hard. It would seem that the person is not going to look at you that way because you're not maintaining your balance.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether the beliefs would come up here at all.
Well, they came up here. I mean, there's things.
Maybe you say it a different way.
Yeah, and it may not come out with the word belief, but there's every rule of the game, every frame is a belief. So there were old frames of mind that somehow had a belief about a client's necessities being my obligation, and then the process of I've had enough of that doesn't work because of this and that consequence. So what do you need now? What frame of mind do you need? What frame do you need? How would you want to play this new one? Now, in this case, if Rick was not getting some of that, I would say, who do you need to become so that you can do this? Because it may be at the level of just, I need to do that. Well, can you do that? I don't know. Well, who do you need to be so that you can do that? Or what belief would support you in being able to do that? Or what belief do you need to believe about other people and their necessities, their urgencies?
How much depth would you go if you had some time?
Well, I would spend a full hour just dancing around it. So a demonstration like this is just really to identify the process without spending a lot of time. And I do cut it short because I want to present the process more than the outcome. So.
Typically, though, wouldn't you find that there's multiple frames supporting the negative belief, and the person can really feel stuck?
Yeah.
And all those multiple frames that have been built up and have a lot of strength, I mean, how do you get around
Well,
that?
what we're doing, we're teasing it apart. Name the game. Because the person has to kind of step aside, as it were, to name it. What's not working well? And when we start with the elicitation, what pattern have you had enough of? That'll probably be really in your awareness. What's negative? What's positive about it? And what do you get from that? And what do you get? And so we're teasing it out. And game analysis, or frame game analysis, what we're doing with this particular pattern, is helping us to see how it works. And what some of you will find in this exercise is that the game will just kind of go poof as you pull it apart, because being played by that game is different from analyzing the game. And oftentimes when you put it in words and say, well, here's what's going on, there's that awareness of, this is silly, this is ridiculous. And so as we dance around it, a lot of times that will happen. When you then identify what's the preferred game, and that's that last step there, what's the preferred game, what game would I prefer to play, then we can start building up a matrix of frames, and you may or may not finish that part of it. At this point, we're just detecting the matrix. So those of you who like to get things done, you may have to kind of put it on hold, because that'll come later. Because right now we're really detecting, how does it work? So for those of you who've been through NLP, one of the things we do is to look at the structure of experience. And how we're looking at it now is using games and frames and the matrix. How does it work? If you were to teach me to play that particular game, that other people's urgencies was my obligation, teach me how to play that game. What would I need to think? What states would I need to go into? How do I know to start? To what kind of urgencies would I respond this way? And so as we get the structure of it, oftentimes just detailing out those structures, the thing goes poof. It just can't continue now that we've exposed it. And so that's what we're doing with this one.
Sort of meta-model, like kind of thing, get down into it.
Yeah, we're meta-modeling the details of it. Any questions on how to do it? We're going to do this very quickly again, just 10 minutes each, so you may not go into building up the preferred game, but that'll come tomorrow, building up the preferred game. Now we just want to expose the old game. Does everybody have an old game that you've had enough of? Which one? Which one do I pick? The game is, I'm overwhelmed with all these problems, and I don't know where to start. Game. So I would encourage you to find someone new that you haven't worked with, and we'll just switch partners and go through this process, and we'll be back, and then back here in 20 minutes. How did it go in the exercise? Okay. Chris?
In working with the difference in item 4 and 5, I mean, isn't it possible that somehow, if you get into talking about all that positive sides to this, because you're trying to build that up so you can make the switch, that you decide, hey, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you enjoy it.
I mean, you're almost, if there's positives there, you're almost pulling the person maybe only just temporarily out of that process.
So that's a possibility.
Yeah.
A person, I have, in doing these kinds of questions, sometimes worked with somebody. They said that they are tired of this, but when they really got looking at it, it wasn't all that bad.
Okay.
Sometimes we think we should be playing another game. And so I may be trying to make a change because I think I should. But when I really get to it, well, no, this is pretty positive. There's some unpleasantness, and so I might want to refine the game, not really change it. So this is once again where I don't take responsibility for the choices a person wants to make in terms of their beliefs, their values, how they want to live their life. What this frame game analysis does is really put them at choice points so they can see and really have choice from mindfulness. Now, I do have to say with this pattern, whenever I say, what pattern have you been playing that you have had enough of? And when they name the negatives always outweigh the positives. So then I can ask the question, how can you keep this? How can you maintain the positive values and play a new game? Because I don't want to take that from you. That's valuable. And by asking that question, how can you keep this and play a new game? Who would you need to be? What would you need to believe? What would you need to decide? What resource would you need? So that keeping all of this, you can play a new game. And one of the presuppositions in NLP and neurosemantics is that if you give a person a choice, they'll always go to the best choice. For them. They'll go to the best choice for them, given their maps of the world, their understandings, that when people are given, here's crap and here's a wonderful life, that people will make the best choice. And when they make the choice, then it's not being imposed and they're not being forced or controlled. They're making a choice. And this is where running our own brain and being mindful seems to me to fit our essential nature. And so that's why I'm not afraid to even talk. Give me all the positives of this negative thing. Well, if it's that positive, what's negative about it? Maybe you shouldn't change it. And then they'll identify that, and maybe we need to go, okay, what's the consequence of that? Maybe in their time frame, they're just thinking, well, there's this few negatives. Well, if you live that way, where will that lead? Where will that lead? Is this really the direction you want to go? And oftentimes, just having that conversation, that becomes really negative. And no, I'm ready to quit that. So keeping these positives, what new game would you want to play? And it gives them the chance to rebuild. Other comments, experiences, insights, questions? That went pretty well. Okay, able to detect a matrix of frames. Anybody change a matrix while you were in the process of that?
I found that just by fleshing it out, coming up with a new game, new name for it, was a major shift.
Okay. Okay, so just fleshing it out created a major shift.
Yeah.
Okay. Bruce?
I have a question. Why is it that when we try to find frames or to, better ourselves, why is that painful?
Painful?
Yeah.
So it's painful for you?
That's a painful game.
One of the things that sometimes seduces us is a frame of familiarity. Because to leave the familiar is to go to the unfamiliar. So what's your meanings of familiar and unfamiliar? Is unfamiliar fearful, giving up, lost? Does it have those significances? Does the unfamiliar feel dangerous, scary, threatening? So the difference in how you experience change is if your frames around unfamiliar are positive, you'll be more of a change embracer. If familiarity is really, really important and security and the known is really strong, then change can feel like a loss of the world that you have known and that you've been acquainted with, even though it had some unpleasant things. So that would be one possibility. That's one possibility. What you believe about change, of alteration, a transfer. What do you believe about that? What does that mean to you? What do you understand? So we can build a matrix around change to see.
So it's not a general thing for everybody. Because usually I like change. I usually embrace change. But when it comes to changing for the positive, like learning new things or picking up a book at NLP, and picking up a book and reading it and understanding it because you want to do good for yourself. Then when you actually try to practice it, it just hurts down deep. I don't know why.
Okay. Well, we could explore that matrix later on to see, what's inside
I know
there.
everybody felt like that if it was just me.
I think it's more typical than not, as he shrinks in his seat. None of the rest of us are like that. How does it feel way down deep inside your pericardium? I think it is more typical than not that we are seduced by the familiar and the known and some other facets about change.
Michael, would it be something almost like this Lucy-Charlie Brown relationship that's really dysfunctional and in fact pretty toxic? You look at a lot of Lucy strips and like, what are you dealing with this person? But I wonder if we end up with those same type of codependency, toxic relationships with our own thoughts. Where we've developed this kind of unhealthy relationship, but it's familiar and somehow we don't have the outside intervention to break free from it.
So what Brian is talking about now, we're going to visit in the morning. Tomorrow we're going to look at the meaning-making matrix. And if your thinking patterns themselves have any kind of dysfunction in them or toxic, so we'll look at the 10 thinking disorders that rational emotive therapy has identified, like personalizing, exaggerating, minimizing, awfulizing, shoulding, musting. It's just another way of looking at the meta-model distinctions. And if you think in those ways, it's a great way to make yourself miserable. In fact, that's what Albert Ellis and some of Aaron and some of the other ones who developed that form of therapy said. And there's a book that Albert Ellis wrote several years ago. I love the title. The book was just okay, but the title was great. The title was How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything, / I mean anything. Because there are thinking patterns that you can make yourself miserable with. Personalizing, minimizing the good things, exaggerating the negative things, awfulizing, shoulding. I mean, people who should all over themselves and others. The next best thing is masturbating, or masturbating. Yeah, I must do this, I must do that, I must do that. And it's a way of making yourself miserable. And when you think in those ways, so we'll look at that tomorrow, because it may be the thinking pattern that is creating the misery. And just stop thinking that way, because most of those are childish ways of thinking that we just need to outgrow. And then with that, we would have a bad relationship to the way I construct meaning. That's right. Well, when we come back, we're going to look at another pattern. We're going to use a positive thing to do some matrix detection. And so we'll take 15 minutes, stretch, energize, drink water, whatever, and we'll see you in 15 minutes. Page 17 in your manuals has this diagram, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about states, because the matrix is grounded in your mind-body state. And as a mind-body state, it's a state of thought and awareness and consciousness. So a mind-body state is a state of thought and awareness, consciousness, and a state of your physiology and the things you do with your physiology. So we say that we have two royal roads into a state. If we want to explore, what state am I in right now? How pure and distinct is that state? What is that state about? And how intense is that state? And so when we start thinking about states, since everything is grounded in the state in the matrix, one of the places you can do matrix detection is, what state is the person in? If a person is in a state, then what are the frames that make that state so? Because there's a correlation. If you're in a joyful state, you've got to have a joyful movie, joyful words, joyful thoughts going on. If you're in a fearful state, then there's going to be fearful thoughts, fearful movie. There's a correlation between what we think and what we feel, the game that's in that state, and then the frames that govern that. So as we think about states, I'll throw a few of these slides up, and it's about this page here, about the nature and the quality of our states, because we're going to be calibrating to our states. A neurolinguistic state gives us two royal roads into the state, and so that allows us to detect a state. A state is an energy field, and so part of state awareness is what is the mental energy, the emotional energy, the physical energy of this state. Can you see a state in somebody? Can you see a depressed state, an angry state, a fearful state? A calm, relaxed state, a loving, sensitive, caring state. We can detect a state as we sense the energy of that state, the energy of the mental ideas and concepts, of the physical gestures, movements. And so we talk about calibrating to a state and then exploring, where does the state come from? How quickly can you get into this state? Can you turn it on? Can you turn it off? How many can fly into a rage? Got that skill down? Fly into a rage? You can be driving along, listening to the radio, and all of a sudden somebody does something. Everybody can fly into a state?
Oh yeah, I just did it.
Can you fly into a calm?
No, it's hard to do.
Harder to fly into a calm. Everybody have a telephone voice? You mean yelling at your loved ones, and the phone rings? Hello. Flying into a calm. We can change states very quickly if you give the right stimulus. And part of state management in NLP, part of state management is learning to get those cues setting them up as anchors so that I can quickly go into confidence or playfulness or curiosity or any state that for you operates as a state of excellence. So first of all, identifying what would be the states of excellence that I want to have in my relationship. What would be the states of excellence in business? What would be the states that I need to just access very, very quickly? And you practice accessing a state over and over, and after a while, you can switch it on. Any method actor can do that. I've worked with and done some coaching with several actors, and it's interesting how quickly they can go into tears or into sadness or anger or just any of these basic emotions, because a state is a set of awarenesses and physiology, and you can use your physiology to go into a state. So sometimes when you can't think your way there, you can put your body and move your body in such a way, the breathing, the face, so that it elicits the thoughts that corresponds to the body. Which is why you can interrupt someone in a real negative state. Richard Bandler told me this many years ago. He said our emotional states are in relationship to gravity. And so I started thinking about that, and as I drove back from San Diego, where I did my training, I started thinking about that. If my state is in relationship to gravity, if you change gravity, the person won't know how to be in that state. So I had a friend, his name was Dennis. He came in the next day, and he was saying how depressed he was. And I said, come here. So I got him over on the wall and had him stand on his head, and I held his feet. And I said, how depressed do you feel? He said, I don't feel depressed at all. I feel embarrassed, and I can't believe I'm paying you money to do this. I said, great. No depression. I said, try really, really hard to feel depressed. And I said, no, I'm serious. You know, all the bad things happening in your life, come on, think about them. Because our bodies have a relationship to gravity as well as other, and you change the body, and oftentimes you can't go into that state. So in terms of state and state management, this is what grounds us, because we learn how to move through the world. There's a certain posture, movement, voice. So you could ask someone, if they're really depressed, to look up and to use a voice like this to talk about how depressed they are. And they'll find it really hard. So knowing about states and what makes up our states and the energy field of our states. In terms of state awareness, another thing that we always do with states is to identify how much do you have this state. If 0 is not at all and 10 is I couldn't be even more in this state, then how much do you have this state? Because states have intensity. And we can scale or gauge or benchmark the intensity of a state. How much do you have this particular state right now? Most of the time, we have so many mixed states going on simultaneously, we're not in a pure state. Well, a part of me is thinking about that, but then a part of me is thinking about this, and a part of me is thinking about that. And so we don't have a lot of intensity and focus. When you have a lot of intensity and focus, you're really in a genius state. In a highly focused, engaged state about one thing, and you're all there. In fact, that's the problem with our regular normal states. We're not all there. But when we are all there and focused and engaged in one thing, that's what we call a genius state. So when we talk about accessing your personal genius, we're talking about setting up some frames so that when you get there, you're of one mind, and everything in you is aligned to do, to engage, to think about one thing. And it's amazing all the resources that are available when you're there. So how much do you have this state? Sometimes we can't do the metastating because the state we have is not strong enough. So we need to crank it up, juice it up, get it to where it's a strong state, and then apply that back to ourselves to set that as a frame. So in terms of states, there's intensity of states. In terms of accessing states, so those of you who've been in NLP, these are our two key ways. Think about a time when. So you pull out your video arcade and think about all this, all the different times. And sometimes that works. Some people, they're too perfectionistic. Well, that time was okay, but it wasn't great this time. And so by the time the whole process is over, you're still trying to pick. You know, just pick one, and we'll start with it, and we'll work with it. Then we do the as if. What would it be like if you were really in a particular state? What would it be like if you're really in a learning state? Give me the eyes of learning. What would learning eyes be like? And what would the posture be and the breathing if you were fully, completely in that state? So we do the imagine what it would be like if. And so these are two ways that we can access a state and put us into a state in terms of accessing. So we'll be doing a lot of this in the next few days as we use states to metastate ourselves and to work with states. State dependency is a key concept, and what this means is that when you're in a state and the state is pretty intense, then your learning, your memory, your imagination, your behavior, your speech, your behavior is dependent upon that state. In fact, the state almost has a life of its own. Do you know what I mean by that? Have you ever been in a state where you were just laughing so much and it was hurting, you know, and you were saying, stop. But you were in such a fun, delightful, ludicrous state that everything looked funny. You know, the doors looked funny, the lights looked funny, just everything, because the state almost had a life of its own and everything was being filtered. And later on you came back in there and you were wondering, how was that so funny? People who get drunk oftentimes get into those states, and they're in such a state, and that intoxicated state, that when they're sober later on, I can't believe I thought that way, or felt that way, or talked that way. So that state dependency is that the state becomes so much that it has a life of its own. Has anybody here ever woken up in the morning grumpy? Anybody experience grumpiness? And if you had intense grumpiness, and you were really cranky, and really irritated, you could see the world in terms of that grumpiness. And you could be giving out grumpiness because it looks like it's out there. But really, you take it everywhere you go. And of course, if we meet a grumpy person, whether they're driving or telling us what to do for the day, if they're grumpy, that grumpiness can have a life of its own. At least we can walk away from them. They've got to take it everywhere they go until it gets interrupted. So state dependency. Now, state dependency is what then creates metastates. So for those of you new to metastates, this is the very key that leads to metastates, from state dependency to metastates. Some people will get in a state of fear, and they get more fearful, more fearful, more fearful. And after a while, the fear, well, they'll be in the state dependency of fear, and they can see fear everywhere. The danger at that point is that that fear can get connected to other things. And it can happen in the simplest way. A therapist, a friend, a lover could say, well, you're not afraid of driving, are you? Come to think of it. Well, you're not afraid of shopping at the mall, are you? And what happens is they just start attaching it. Well, at least you're not afraid of your own self. Ah! And they can become agoraphobic. The first time I ever worked with agoraphobic, I had to go to her house, you know, because she couldn't come to me, because, you know, what would happen on her way to the office. When I went to her house, I wasn't aware of how much that state dependency was going to control things. And so I said to her, well, let's first relax, you know, because she was pretty uptight. And I said, let's just relax. Just take a deep breath and notice the heart beating. And she said, you think I'm having a heart attack? You're not having a heart attack. But her fear was now applied back to her own self. And so we can attach things to things. So fear is one thing, fear of something out there that might be dangerous. That'd be good information. I want my fear. But if you became afraid of your fear, if you became angry at your fear, ashamed of your fear, embarrassed of your fear, guilt of your fear, So when we take those negative emotions and apply them back and create anger of anger, fear of anger, disgust, shame of anger, all these mixtures, we're creating these meta states that put us at odds with our own self and starting to create a matrix. So one of the things about state and the matrix is asking, what state are you in? What state are you in about whatever? Because that'll help us to ground it, to find out what's going on. What do you think and feel about this state? And oftentimes what people think and feel about that state is, I hate this state. I'm ashamed of this state. I'm embarrassed of this state. I fear this state. And at that point, we have the structure of their matrix. Really, you don't need to know anything more than that. Because the solution will be the acceptance of that fear, the acceptance and appreciation of that anger, that welcoming and acknowledging and honoring of the fear, the anger, the sadness, the shame, the guilt. That a negative emotion to a negative emotion puts us at self-abuse. And so the solution is so counterintuitive, welcoming and accepting it. And so as we look at state and the matrix is grounded in a state, and the state also, with this state dependency, we can start metastating ourselves into a real negative spiral if we apply negative emotional state to negative emotional state. So one of the things I like doing is to raise your right hand, repeat after me. For the next 7 days, I will not bring negative emotions against myself. How does that feel? Because most of us have spent we're pretty skilled at attacking our own states. Now, the energy of a negative emotion, when something is threatening or dangerous or loss, is that now I can do something. But when I bring it against myself, the energy has nowhere to go except to attack me. And it could happen, to create all kinds of mental diseases or physical. So when we start being kinder, gentler to ourselves, that's going to create a whole different matrix. And so the first skills I would recommend is acceptance, acknowledgement, just an emotion, just a feeling, just an awareness, just a thought. And you're more than your thoughts and feelings. And appreciation. What is valuable about my anger? What is valuable that I can appreciate about my sadness or my fear or my embarrassment? How many here love to be embarrassed? How many here would turn around and say, may I ask you a question? We all know somebody who makes $10 million a movie doing that stuff. I mean, talk about welcoming, and look at Jim Carrey, the Canadian. I wish I'd thought of that. I mean, here's a guy who welcomes embarrassment and plays with it and utilizes it. Dale Carnegie, many years ago, a long time before Jim Carrey came along, said, the secret to public speaking is get up, make a fool of yourself, get used to it, and then you'll be a great public speaker. But if you're afraid of embarrassment, if you're so over self-conscious of what will they think, then instead of thinking about them, you'll be thinking about yourself. So here's that paradox, here's that counterintuitiveness of so many of these things, that every negative emotion is wonderful for whatever it's message signal that it's for. And we misuse our negative emotions when we use them against ourselves or even use them against someone else. That negative emotions is just to tell us what's the difference between the way I map things and my experience of things.
In business classes, many students knock themselves, and I say, and I share this with you, don't knock yourself. The rest of the world's going to do it to you for free.
So this is a little diagram I use for metastates, for those of you new to metastates. The meta function, meta just means something higher. That's all it means, just something higher. It means this thought or this feeling is about another thought or feeling. So we ask the question, given this experience that you're having, whatever it is, whatever game that you're playing and whatever experience it gives you, what do you think and feel about that? You're asking a meta question. And you're asking a question that's going to flesh out a frame. What do you think about that? What do you believe about that? What do you expect about that? What do you understand about that? We're asking a meta question that really is moving up into the matrix of frames. And what we're doing is inviting that person to keep stepping back. Well, what do I think about that? I don't know. I think this. Okay. So what does that mean to you? And as they step back, they're gaining a larger perspective. They're expanding their consciousness. And this is going to give them more choice and control over that matrix. Oftentimes, I was trained as a counselor, as a psychologist. And I was trained to be really sympathetic and empathetic. And when we got close to sensitive issues, I would start, tiptoeing. Someone said, "This is really sad." And I go, "Yeah. Well, you're okay. Just make 5 affirmations that you have value. I'll see you next week." I would just tiptoe as if, frame by implication, as if they were fragile. And of course, by sending that message, I don't trust you to handle this and just look at it straight in the face. I think you're fragile. I think you fall apart. When I treated them that way, they started behaving that way. So what we want to do is something very different. And at first, it may even, especially if you're trained as a therapist, it may feel mean. Okay, so you got this sadness. What happened? Well, my dad died, my mother died, my child died. So that meant a lot to you. Yeah, it really did. And so they go more into say, this sadness is really good because that shows how much it meant to you. What else did they mean to you? And they say this and say that. What else? And they say this and say that. You must really love them. Yeah. And what we do, instead of treating them fragile, what does that mean to you? So now that you have this awareness of this emptiness, what do you need to do to keep them and all their value with you for the rest of your life? Because you can't hug them, can't touch them anymore because they're gone. But what value will you carry with you from them that you'll never lose? Well, they meant this to me. They meant this, and they meant this. And well, let's fill that up. How do you represent that? And is that important to you? And then the purpose of grief, the purpose of sadness is fulfilled. When we lose something, it's for us to become aware of significance so we can own it and claim it, and then replace what we can with it. The purpose of sadness is not to be sad, but to recognize value. And so by going in and working with whatever and valuing that, and how does this sadness teach? What does this sadness teach you? What can you appreciate about this sadness? And so we can say things like, sadness really tenderizes the heart, doesn't it? Sadness really makes you sensitive. This is the moment you got to live, and you're going to live it. Sadness makes you more human. It makes you more appreciating of the people that's in your life now. What else can you appreciate about sadness? And this person that you've lost, what do you now have to give that you got from him or her, or that she contributed to you? What do you now have that you can give? Because so many sad people will just live the rest of their life sadly. And what a waste of human energy and love and compassion and learning. Because now they're afraid of their sadness. Don't get me going, because I'll just start crying and I'll never stop. Really? Let's see this. Because they believe that. Or someone says, you wouldn't like me angry. And I always say, well, are you son of a bitch or something? Show me. Show me losing control. People keep telling me to lose. Show me losing control. Just lose control all over the floor right here. Because if we're not afraid of their emotion, if I'm not afraid of their emotion, it's just emotion, then it helps them to not be afraid of their own emotion. It's just an emotion. It's just thought. It's just feeling. It's an experience. And you're more than that emotion, aren't you? In fact, that's a great line to set as a frame. You're more than your emotions, aren't you? That's just an expression that came from your frames and maps. You're more than that, aren't you? What else are you other than that feeling there?
I was just going to say, same thing you're saying is that when, like you've been saying, negative emotions, and a lot of people, I think, tend to unconsciously equate that with bad emotion, and then that's when you avoid it. So rather than making it useful or finding what you can, gain from it or what you can learn from it. So, what do you still use negative emotion, and that's just,
So if you think about the nervous system has two kinds of nerve impulses. One is excitatory, and one is inhibitory. Positive, negative. Like the brakes of the car, inhibitory, inhibiting, slowing down, stopping, and exciting, the gas, the accelerator.
So when you're feeling these emotions, your body naturally tries to suppress or...
So negative emotions is like the brakes, and that's why they're so intense. Stop, look, listen, there's danger. The positive emotions is like the accelerator, and I suppose if you have a strong enough engine, you can really rev it, but most of our cars, you just go, and it's not real intense, it's just the go. So if you're driving through life and you get your brakes on, it's going to take so much more energy to get going. So if you live in that negative emotion, the positives, like the accelerator, gets us moving. I wouldn't want to drive up in the mountains here in Colorado without brakes in a car. I want my brakes. I want to inhibit. So my nervous system is, if something is not going well, I need to stop, look, and listen. And that's what a negative. So an emotion is the difference. In neurosemantics, we define it this way. An emotion is the difference between your map of the world and your experience of the world. That's why every emotion is always relative. So some people, when they're really angry, it's because they got a stupid map. Nobody should ever stop me from getting my way fully and completely every moment of my life. I think you're going to be mad a lot. But when you remap that, well, things happen, and everything is not fair, everything's not just, and when everything isn't, it balances out, and you don't really have a sense of much emotion. And when things are going really well, then it gets positive. There's lots of energy for moving on and doing what's working well. So an emotion is just the difference between your map and the experience of the territory. So that's why we can embrace every emotion. The ones that stop us, inhibit us, that are negative, and the ones that are excitatory and positive in that sense. So this is just how we work with the matrix. So when someone tells me that they're feeling something, that's great information. That's great information. Now I want to know, given that you feel this, how'd you do it? How'd you do that? How'd you create that depression? How'd you create that sadness? You're sad about what? Was not living up to your expectations? So what are their frames of expectation or anticipation? If you step back from all of that, how well does that work? Because to ask that question, how well does that work? Does that serve you well? Does that enhance your life? Does that empower you as a person? To ask that question, a person has to, as it were, step out of their matrix. So this is the way we have an exit from the matrix. And you can see all those questions there. Does this empower you as a person? Does this enhance your life? Does this make your relationships better? Do you want to keep going in this direction into the future? What does it allow you to do out in the world and to achieve and to accomplish? Is it ecological for you in all your systems and all the relationships you have? Is this the kind of meaning that you want to give to this? Does this make life a party? There's one of the questions on that page. I like that one. Does this make life a party? And whatever the person says, these are all yes-no questions. You can also say, to what extent does it do it? But for the most part, these are yes-no questions. Because we're really asking a person to move back to choice point. Do I want to keep living in this matrix? Do I want to keep thinking this way, feeling this way, acting this way, talking this way? Does this really work? And when a person says, it really doesn't. Maybe once upon a time it did. Maybe once it had some positive intentions. Maybe there were some secondary gains once upon a time. But it really doesn't. We then have the leverage to say, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to take counsel from this? Or are you going to stand up and say no to this so that you can say yes to something even better? A decision, the word D means cut, and cision, a decision involves a yes-no. It's a choice. And to be able to say no to some of our frames is such an important skill and ability. It's a mastery skill. If you can't say no to some of those frames, if all that chatter, you have to take counsel from it. So one of the things I like doing with state and emotion, okay, you're feeling this. When you listen to this feeling and let this feeling speak to you, what do you need to do in response to this feeling? Because an emotion, really interesting, even the term emotion, it comes from the Latin, and it used to be ex, motion, and it means to move out. Because that's what an emotion does. It activates the motor cortex so that our thinking and our feeling moves us to take action. An emotion is an action-oriented impulse. So welcome the emotion. Do you need to take counsel of this emotion? If you do, what do you need to do? And oftentimes a person who's been living, especially in a negative emotion, they've been living in regret and shame and fear and whatever it is, and they've been living it a long time. The event that initiated was a long time gone. And when I asked them the question, okay, here's an emotion, let's welcome it in. Do you need to take counsel of this? Is it saying anything of value for you today? And I can't tell you how many times people say, well, no. Okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to just let it have a life of its own? Or are you going to say enough is enough? You're a choice point about what to do with the emotion. You don't have to obey your emotions. I like always putting that as a frame. You don't have to obey your emotions. I mean, who's the boss? You are your emotions. Now, in the human potential movement in the 60s, there was a thought that grew up in psychology in this country and in Europe and some other places, and that is, you got to work. If you feel the emotion, you got to be true to the emotion. So we went through a period of time where people in therapy rooms were taking these plastic bats and hitting each other. Get the emotion out, as if it was steam or something. Get it out. What we found was that it just activated and reinforced the anger and made them more angry. And so more abuse occurred. So they stopped doing that eventually. So the question is, who do you ultimately give yourself to your choices, your intentions, or to your emotions? And do you need to listen to that? So here's the quality control of the matrix. As you step back, after you identify some frames, identify some games, stepping back and asking, do you need that? Does it serve you well? Does it enhance you? And once you have that distinction, no it doesn't, then we can invite the person to access a state of no and to refuse it. So this will give us a lot of management over our matrix. Once we realize how the matrix is grounded in the state, and sometimes the emotional state that we're in is an old, dated emotion. It's not even current. It may not have been current for years. And it's just been perpetuated, a default program of some sort. And now it's time to say, I'm moving on from that old emotion.